Redshift here, doing my part to shift perceptions out of the pink and into the red. Okay, so I want to read some clips from the Dalai Lama's book, Ethics for the New Millennium. He says, if the prospect of confronting our suffering head-on can sometimes seem a bit daunting, it is very helpful to remember that nothing within the realm of what we commonly experience is permanent. All phenomena are subject to change and decay. Also, as the description of reality I gave earlier suggests, we are mistaken if we ever suppose that our experience of suffering, or happiness for that matter, can be attributed to a single source. According to the theory of dependent origination, everything that arises does so within the context of innumerable causes and conditions. If this was not so, as soon as we came into contact with something that we considered good, automatically we would become happy. Whenever we came into contact with something we considered bad, automatically we would become sad. The causes of joy and sorrow would be easy to identify, and life would be very simple. We would have good reason to become attached to one sort of person or thing or event, and to be angry with and want to avoid others, but that is not reality. Personally, I find enormously helpful the advice given about suffering by the great Indian scholar Saint Shantideva. It is essential, he said, that when we face difficulties of whatever sort, we do not let them paralyze us. If we do, we are in danger of becoming totally overwhelmed by them. Instead, using our critical faculties, we should examine the nature of the problem itself. If we find that there exists the possibility we could solve it by some means or other, if we find that there exists a possibility we could solve it by some means or other, there is no need for anxiety. In other words, if you look at the problem and you go, oh, there's a solution, well then there's no problem, right? Because you just put all your energy into enacting the solution, right? The rational thing would then be to devote all one's energy to finding that means and acting on it. If, on the other hand, we find that the nature of the problem admits to no solution, then there's no point in worrying about it. If nothing can change the situation, worrying only makes it worse. Taken out of context of the philosophical text in which it appears as the culmination of a complex series of reflections, Shantideva's approach may sound somewhat simplistic, but its very beauty lies in this quality of simplicity, and no one could argue with its sheer common sense. As to the possibility that suffering has some actual purpose, we will not go into that here, but to the extent that our experience of suffering reminds us of what all others also endure, it serves as a powerful injunction to practice compassion and refrain from causing others pain. And to the extent that suffering awakens our empathy and causes us to connect with others, it can serve as the basis of compassion and love. Hence I am reminded of the great example. Here I am reminded of the example of the great Tibetan scholar and religious practitioner who spent more than 20 years in prison, enduring the most terrible treatment, including torture, following the invasion of our country. During that time, our country being Tibet, during that time, those students of his who had escaped into exile would often tell me that the letters he wrote and had smuggled out of jail contained the most profound teachings on love and compassion they had ever encountered. Unfortunate events, though potentially a source of anger and despair, have equal potential to be a source of spiritual growth. Whether or not this is the outcome depends on our response. So this is quite wise, quite true. I like the part where he said that things don't just come from one source. They come from a complex cause. They come from a very complex set of causes and conditions. A lot of conditions have to be present and a lot of causes have to be present to make a certain thing happen in a lot of cases, most cases, right? Like for you to get angry, maybe you have to have lost sleep the night before. You have to have, had things that have annoyed you before that led to the point where you're at the point of snapping and losing your temper. You have to be alive, which means all the food and all the training and raising you and everything had to have happened before that to get you to the point to where you're alive at this point. To experience that frustration, you have to live in a certain country where the kind of behavior that someone engaged in you to make you angry is legal or allowable, right? There's all these complex causes and conditions that lead up to you responding a certain way or something happening to you or whatever, right? Like everything that happens does not happen because of one thing. It may seem like it does, but it doesn't. It happens because of a lot of things. Right, all the bunch of things, everything in the whole past has led us to this point. Like if the U.S. had not been invented, China would not be, taking over the way they are now, and with all this high technology. And the U.S. probably would not have been invented if other things had not been invented before the U.S. that contributed to the Constitution being created, etc. So like everything that ever happens is the result of tons and tons of things that have happened, both recently, within your lifetime, within the last few minutes, the last few days, the last few weeks, months, years, your whole life, and even all the way back for centuries in the past. All that has led to this point, right? I also want to point out that I think the flaw in Shantideva's logic there about, if there's a solution, then why worry? Just enact the solution, or put all your effort into trying to create the solution that you think is the solution or whatever. And if there's no solution, well then why worry about it? I think this is a faulty because while I really like that, and I think a lot of people would benefit from knowing that, I think it's flawed because if you don't know whether there's a solution, then how do you just let it go? If you're worried that there is a solution but you can't find it, or you have the solution but it's you don't know whether it's actually worth doing or whether you can actually put in enough effort to actually make it happen, or which of possible solutions which may work. There's no definite solution which will work, and there's no definite no solution will work. There's several solutions, but they may work, they may not. They are varying degrees of, whether they work for you or whether they work for other people or whether they work for you at other people's expense, and they take various amounts of effort or sacrifice, and maybe it's better to nobly sacrifice for other people and do something that's less good for you but more good for other people. But at the same time, if they take that sacrifice for granted, then you just wasted your own time, your own money, etc., because they didn't appreciate your sacrifice, so now it was a waste, and you should have just done what was best for you, which was easier in the first place. You see what I'm saying? Like, it's unsure whether they're going to take your sacrifice for granted. It's unsure which is the moral thing, whether being selfish will actually impact people in a negative way. And even if it does, maybe they deserve it. And even if they don't deserve it, maybe if you did the more self-sacrificial thing and helped them more, did the thing that was more beneficial to more people, they would take it for granted and it wouldn't benefit them anyway. Right? You see, so there's all these middle gray area solutions which are the problem, because things are never usually so clear-cut as, oh, this is a solution or there is no solution. It's usually somewhere in the middle, and that's where all the mess comes in. That's where all the doubt and the confusion and the stress and all the rest of it comes from, because it's usually not so clear-cut. So I think this solution is kind of quite faulty, and I wanted to point that out because I think it's important to know. And then this part says, let's see here. Yada, yada, yada. On a recent visit to New York, a friend told me that the number of billionaires in America has increased from 17 just a few years ago to several hundred today. Yet at the same time, the poor remain poor, and in some cases are becoming poorer. This I consider to be completely immoral. It is also a potential source of problems. While millions do not even have the basic necessities of life, adequate food, shelter, education, and medical facilities, the inequality of wealth distribution is a scandal. If it were the case that everyone had a sufficiency for their needs and more, then perhaps a luxurious lifestyle would be tenable. But if this was what that individual really wanted, it would be difficult to argue that they need to refrain from exercising their right to live as they see fit. Yet things are not like that. In this one world of ours, there are areas where people throw surplus food away, while others close by, our fellow human beings, innocent children among them, are reduced to scavenging among rubbish, and many starve. Thus, although I cannot say that the life of luxury led by the rich is wrong in and of itself, assuming they are using their own money and have not acquired it dishonestly, that is, I do say that it is unworthy, that it spoils us. Moreover, it strikes me that the lifestyles of the rich are often absurdly complicated. One friend of mine who stayed with an extremely wealthy family told me that every time they went swimming, they were handed a robe to wear after. This would then be changed for a fresh one every time they used the pool, even if they did so several times in one day. Extraordinary. Ridiculous, even. I do not see how living like this adds anything to one's comfort. As human beings, we have only one stomach. There's a limit to the amount we can eat. Similarly, we have only 8 fingers and 2 thumbs, so we cannot wear 100 rings. Whatever argument there may be concerning choice, the extra we have is of no purpose to us in the present when we are actually wearing a ring. The rest lies useless in their boxes. The appropriate use of wealth, as I explained to the members of one hugely prosperous Indian family, is found in philanthropic giving. In this particular case, I suggested, since they asked, that perhaps spending their money on education would be the best thing they could do. The future of the world is in our children's hands. Therefore, if we wish to bring about a more compassionate and therefore fairer society, it is essential that we educate our children to be responsible, caring human beings. When a person is born rich or acquires wealth by some other means, they have a tremendous opportunity to benefit others. What a waste when that opportunity is squandered on self-indulgence. I feel strongly that luxurious living is inappropriate, so much so that I must admit that whenever I stay in a comfortable hotel and see others eating and drinking expensively while outside, I see people who do not even have anywhere to spend them while outside. Sorry, I read that a little bit wrong. I feel strongly that luxurious living is inappropriate, so much so that I must admit that whenever I stay in a comfortable hotel and see others eating and drinking expensively while outside, I see people who do not even have anywhere to spend the night, I feel greatly disturbed. It reinforces my feeling that I am no different from either the rich or the poor. We are the same in wanting happiness and not to suffer. We have an equal right to that happiness. As a result, I feel that if I were to see a workers' demonstration going by, I would certainly join in. And yet of course, the person who is saying these things is one of those enjoying the comforts of the hotel. Indeed, I must go further. It is also true that I possess several valuable wristwatches, and while I feel that if I were to sell them, I could perhaps build some huts for the poor, so far I have not. In the same way, I do feel that if I were to observe a strictly vegetarian diet, not only would I be setting a better example, but I would also be helping to save innocent animals' lives. So far, I have not, and therefore must admit a discrepancy between my principles and my practice in certain areas. At the same time, I do not believe everyone can or should be like Mahatma Gandhi and live the life of a poor peasant. Such dedication is wonderful and to be greatly admired, but the watchword is as much as we can, without going to extremes. Okay, so I wanted to read that because I thought the Dalai Lama explained that quite well, because that is how I feel. I do not have a problem with wealth in and of itself, or with rich people being rich, or whatever. What I have a problem with is them not using their wealth benevolently. You know, it's obvious that there are hugely better uses to which their wealth could be put. And it's also hugely obvious that their wealth has a corrupting effect on them and their children. So why not give most of their wealth away? I mean, I'm not saying they have to impoverish themselves, but like, if you have like $10 billion, why not give away, $950 million, so that you have, or what would that be, $9,500? Whatever, like, why not just give away $9 billion and then another $500 million so that you only have $500 million left? If you have $10 billion, and then you give away, 95% of it, you're still going to have $500 million. You're still going to be able to live basically like a billionaire. You're still going to be able to live super, 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 super well and be in zero danger of losing all your wealth, right? You're still going to be rich for the whole rest of your life, and your children are still going to be rich for the whole rest of their lives, because even if you have 5 children, you can give each of them $100 million. They can turn that into gold and then work and just pay their bills with their job, and then just keep that $100 million in gold and let that accrue and gain even more wealth. And they'll be even richer at the time they die, or roughly, probably. So it's utterly ridiculous that people have like billions and billions of dollars and they do hardly any with it in terms of charity. And some of them even use their billions to do social engineering, like import Muslims into Europe and destroy Europe, and or start wars. Like I mentioned in a previous video, this one billionaire started this war in this country that was mining this one precious metal so that he could, make the metal rarer so he can make a huge profit, right? And then he was selling the arms to the people to start the Civil War also, so he's profiting from the arms sales as well. I mean, these billionaires are pure evil. I mean, maybe not all of them, but a huge percentage of them. They're pure evil, if only just from the viewpoint of the fact that they use barely any of their wealth on charity. And when they do, it's like they throw these lavish parties, and then they're like, donate to this cause or whatever. But like, they take in like, $1 million, but they spent like $1 million on the party. So like, it's ridiculous. It's just a wash. It's not real charity. It's just like making themselves feel good about, doing supposedly some good. They're not really concerned with doing some real good. You know what I'm saying? Because they live in their ivory tower. They're totally deluded. They're totally selfish, totally hedonistic. So that's the problem. It's not having wealth or whatever. It's neglecting to use that wealth for a good purpose. It's totally dishonorable. It's totally disgusting. It's totally shameful, and this is why I shame and criticize MGTOW men of the top 1%, because they are the small-scale equivalent of the billionaires. They may not have $1 billion, but they have an amazing genetic inheritance. They probably have a few $100,000 in the bank, maybe even a couple of million in the bank, and they're doing almost nothing with it. They're just enjoying their nice, comfortable lives, and they're advocating that other people do the same, when most people are not living these nice, comfortable lives like them. Even if they go MGTOW, they're still not going to be able to live these nice, comfortable lives, because they're not top 1% guys in terms of genetic inheritance. They have a bad memory, or low IQ, or they're ugly, or they have, they're sickly, or whatever. or maybe just, you know, an average memory, average IQ. They're average in every way, so they're never going to be able to make a lot of money. You see what I'm saying? So it's utterly shameful when anybody has whether a lot of money or a great genetic inheritance or whatever, and is just satisfied with living a comfortable, happy, hedonistic, nice, you know, just nice, comfortable life. They're not really interested in sacrificing and helping other people, even though if they were doing that, that would be way, way, way more rewarding. That would make them truly happier on a deep, deep level if they did that, but they're not doing it because that's how deluded and selfish they are. Right, and this is a huge, huge, huge problem. And in that book, the same book, Ethics for the New Millennium, the Dalai Lama also talked about how war is like this evil thing. He said it's like a fire. And he said, like, reinforcements, you know, like bringing in more troops to, you know, back up the other troops, like, you know, a troop surge in Iraq or whatever, that kind of thing. Like, that's just like throwing more people into the bonfire to keep the fire of war going. It's like human sacrifice. It really is like that. It's horrific. Right, that's truly what it is. And then I realized when I was watching, I can't remember if I read that before or after, but I recently at almost the same time, maybe the same day or the day before or the day after, I saw the end of Ender's Game, and they surround the blaster that can destroy the whole planet. They surround it with all the ships, like all the individual guys' ships near the enemy planet, right? And then the enemy is all attacking them and stuff, and then they're like driving forward and using all those ships as like cover, as like human shields for the big ship, which can fire the blaster and destroy the whole enemy planet, right? And then they're like letting all their other ships get destroyed, and then they don't really care about that or anything. Not that they don't really care per se. It's just that's like a necessary sacrifice. And then he's like driving all the ships forward as like a heat shield, as they can like drive closer and closer to the planet and like bore away a path through all the enemy ships so they can get a clear path, a line of sight, so they can blast the blaster into the planet and destroy the whole planet, right? So then that's what they do. And they sacrifice almost everybody in the entire fleet to accomplish that. And it's like human sacrifice. That's exactly what it's like. It's just totally exactly like what the Dalai Lama was talking about. But when you watch the movie, it's kind of like this noble thing, right? Because like these guys give up their lives to like, you know, to allow the ship to have that one, you know, that 1 second where it could blast the blaster and destroy the whole planet. But at the same time, it's like what Ender said at the end when he found out there wasn't actually a simulation like he thought it was. This was actually the real battle, and they just didn't tell him so he wouldn't get all, you know, stressed out about it or whatever, right? So, and he said, you know, I'm going to be remembered as a murderer, as a killer, as you know, this was genocide, this was xenocide. You know, this is horrific. Like, they weren't even attacking us. They were all, like, waiting while we were waiting outside the planet's, you know, atmosphere and stuff. And they weren't, they like, maybe they were wanting to parlay with us. Maybe they were wanting to bring a truce or communicate somehow so that we could, you know, agree not to fight each other or whatever, right? And he's like saying, you know, I probably would have, you know, done something different. I wouldn't have just attacked if I knew this was real. If I didn't, you know, if I hadn't been tricked into thinking it was a simulation, or if I hadn't been lied to. So this is really how it is. War is like a fire, and troop reinforcements and all the rest of it. It really is like throwing people into a bonfire. It's human sacrifice. It's utterly horrific. And you don't. But at the same time, it's like, is this justified or not? Maybe if you're being attacked by an enemy species, like in the movie Ender's Game, it's justified. But like, if you are, because you're defending your whole species, your whole planet, etc. But if you're just like waging a war against another country, who's to say whether that country or your country is in the wrong, right? So it's a case of like, you got to look at it like the only wars that are truly justified are revolutionary wars. That is, wars against your own government, to overthrow your own government. Because number one, government is inherently tyrannical. Number two, most governments always become tyrannical, even if they start out not that bad. And you know, so sacrificing, you know, in a revolutionary war is justified because then you get freedom after it. You get the end of a war because then there's no government after that, presumably, if you're fighting for anarcho-capitalism. Right? But if you fight other countries, even if you're thinking that you're doing it in self-defense, it could be your country that's the aggressor, that's in the wrong, that's doing evil, that's been oppressing that other country, and that other country only attacked you because you've been oppressing them for decades, right? So now they're fighting back, and then you act like, oh, you've been attacked unjustly for no reason, and now you have to invade this other country because they attacked you first, right? Like, fighting any other country for any reason, even self-defense purposes, is totally unjustified because you don't know whether you're the bad guys or not. You don't know whether your government is lying to you or not. So really, any war is totally unjustified, is human sacrifice, is totally evil, and just pure evil, unless it's a revolutionary war. Revolutionary war ends war, and that is why revolutionary war is justified. Other wars just breed more war, and breed more killing, and breed more conflict, and more psychoticness, more poverty, etc. Like, war does not end by engaging in war when it's a war against another country. It's only when it's a war against your own tyrannical leaders that are getting you into these wars that it's a war that is justified. So that is my view on that. I think that was basically, I mean, I feel like this was a very inferior video. I feel like there was something more I had to say that was sort of like, either I never thought of it, or I thought of it and I wrote it down, but I didn't remember it, or all the details that I wanted to discuss it. Like, this is like one of those tip of the tongue videos where, you know, the insight that I really wanted to do about this was sort of on the tip of my tongue, but I don't think it ever really arrived. But I do sort of want to just point all this kind of stuff out, and hopefully you learn something from this, or understand and develop a new appreciation for the difference between war and revolutionary war. Revolutionary war is always moral, basically, and other kinds of wars, you know, defensive wars, aggressive wars, any other kind of wars that are not against the government, your own government, are illegal, are evil wars that should be illegal or are illegal. I also want to point out the evil of not using your wealth for virtuous purposes, the evil of hedonism, the virtue of being generous, and how this does not have to mean that you're going to live a poor life. I'm not asking people to give 99% of their wealth. I'm just saying, like, give as much as you can to where you can still live a comfortable life, but where you're not living hedonistically. And if you're in the middle class, you should more appreciate the importance of sacrifice, and you have a greater genetic inheritance. So even if you do give all your wealth trying to support, you know, strong movements like the MGTOW Mirror, things that could actually really change the whole course of human history by keeping freedom alive in the West, and therefore, you know, enabling anarcho-capitalism at some point down the line, right? Like, doing this is not even necessarily dooming you to poverty, because you're a top 1% man. You can always make a lot more money later on again, right? Like, sure, maybe you might have to go through a period of poverty, a year, 3 or 5 years, but eventually you're going to get another good job again, or you're going to have some good investments, or you're going to join together with some other rich people or whatever, and then you're going to, because you can hang with them, because you have a good IQ and a really good memory, a really high IQ and a really good memory, you're going to be able to make a ton of money again at some point in the future. So even sacrificing all your wealth is not really sacrificing all your wealth, because you're not sacrificing your genetic inheritance that allows you to make all that wealth in the first place, you see? So people who have wealth, who have, you know, high IQs, great memories, etc., they should be using their genetic inheritance and their money to greatly help the world. And a lot of the so-called philanthropy, not only is it like a wash economically, because they spend a lot of money on, you know, doing these charity events or whatever, but not only that, but it's a case of where, like, they waste their money. They don't spend their money properly. See, if they kept giving, like, on a regular basis, or generation after generation or whatever, then it would be the case where it's like they're used to knowing how to give so that it's actually effective, rather than living it up in their ivory towers and thinking, oh, I'll throw $1 billion here, you know, 10 million here, 100 million here, or whatever, and then they don't really know the reality of how to invest that money properly, so then it ends up being a waste, or it's counterproductive, and it causes all kind of problems that they didn't expect, right? Like, you should give your money where it's actually going to be helpful, where it's going to be useful, where it's not going to create negative backlash, right? Like, feeding the poor is not really a good way to, you know, help people, because then they'll just have more kids, and then they'll be poor, right? Because they're reckless. And they're poor because they have low IQs, and that's where their recklessness comes from, their low IQ, right? So this is how it is. So there's, you know, foolish giving, and then there's wise giving. But on the other hand, like, if you devoted most of your money toward creating a lobby organization that you got a bunch of other rich people to donate to, and they were all donating to it, and this lobbying organization now had like $1 billion, and all this lobby organization did was lobby on behalf of going back to a gold standard or a Bitcoin standard, right? Getting rid of fiat currency, having limited money, talking about how that would be way more efficient, about how it would make everybody way less poor in the country, there'd be more technological advantage in innovation, and this would allow the country to leap forward at a much quicker rate. You could, you know, lead the world by example instead of dominating the world through military violence, etc. Like, you could lobby just endlessly to bring back a gold standard, and then eventually it probably would happen. Especially as, you know, the politicians and or the other billionaires started understanding the importance of honest money on a national scale or whatever. And they could do that, and that would be a great use of their money. Even if it took, you know, 10 years to make it happen. You know, it would still not have been a waste. Even if they spent, you know, $100 billion bringing sound money back, it would pay for itself in terms of all the benefits to society it would have. It would eliminate, female promiscuity, screwed up kids, screwed up society. It would bring back morality. It would end war. It would end welfare. It would just radically improve the country in every single way if we brought back sound money of some kind, whether gold or Bitcoin or whatever else. And so, the rich could be lobbying for that, but they're foolish, and so they're not. And they're just wasting their money, and most of it they're just hogging to themselves. Because, they're Illuminati or whatever, they just realize how important money is, and how nobody's just going to give it to you, and you only stay rich by not being generous, by being stingy. That's how the rich stay rich. Like that one character played by that fat girl, Rebel Wilson, said in that movie, How to Be Single. That's true. Like, the rich stay rich because they're stingy, right? But that's screwed up, and we should not be praising the rich. We should not be allowing them to live. We should be talking about how if they don't want to use their money for helping people, then they don't deserve to be allowed to keep that money. And we're going to overthrow the government and take all their money from them. We should be saying those kinds of things. And I guess that's all I had to say in this video. This has been Redshift. Hit the thumbs up button if you like this video. Hit the thumbs down button if you didn't. Peace trucks.